My friends, what a humiliation for Russia! On June 1st, Ukraine launched a remarkable and very creative operation codenamed Pavutina or Spiderweb. In an unprecedented attack, saboteurs infiltrated enemy territory and struck 5 airfields across Russia. You've seen the images, towers of smoke, and countless Russian aircraft parked side by side, wrapped in flames. With this operation, Ukraine showed a perfect example of how offense is the best defense. The Russians were laughing hard when the Indian Air Force lost a couple fighter jets to Pakistan. It's never gonna happen to us! But now that they lost a dozen bombers, crickets. Oh no, it's not strategically significant anyway. There is no real damage, they can all be repaired.
Right.
You are coping.
Oh yeah, by the way, apologies for the delay. I just got back from my African expedition and it took me a little bit longer than expected to recover. You'll probably hear it in my voice. Oh, but that's not all. Then the Ukrainians attacked the Crimean Bridge. Swarms of drones struck Bryansk, while others targeted Russia's Kronstadt UAV factory. And according to the latest news on the 9th of June, a new wave of Ukrainian drones struck an important factory for Russia's military-industrial production.
Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm.
Wait.
Everybody calm down.
As you can see, Ukrainian spec ops are ravaging Russian rears. Ukraine is betting more and more on low-cost, high-impact, asymmetric tactics to turn the tables on Russia. And just like the Washington Post wrote, Ukraine's dirty war is just getting started. So in this video, we'll take a look at how exactly Ukraine prepared Operation Spiderweb. You'll get to know the mastermind behind this attack, but also with a special focus on the drones that the Ukrainians used. Of course, how many Russian aircraft have been destroyed? 40, 11, or 0? It was all an illusion. All bets are on. And at last, we'll talk about what these strikes mean in the grand scheme of things. We have a lot to talk about, especially since a lot of details were left out and nobody really did a comprehensive data analysis of this operation. Operation Spiderweb actually reminds me of the raids launched by the SAS against German airfields in Libya during World War II. It's strangely similar. Aboard jeeps equipped with Vickers machine guns, the SAS would cross the desert and then wreak hell on enemy airfields, destroying any airplane they encountered. That's how in July 1942, during a 15-minute raid against the Sidi Hanish airfield, the SAS destroyed or damaged 40 Luftwaffe transport and bomber aircraft. Looks like some people got inspired by the TV show SAS Rogue Heroes.
Yeah, baby.
By the way, would you be interested in a review of the TV show SAS Rogue Heroes? Let me know in the comment section below. All this to say that Ukraine used the same mindset to strike Russian airfields, but this time with modern technology. Welcome to the headquarters, and without further ado, let's jump right in. How about we start with some foreplay? From Russia's perspective, strategic bombers serve primarily as platforms for nuclear deterrence, but they're also capable of launching long-range cruise missiles from safe standoff distances. The Russian Air Force maintains 3 types of heavy, long-range bombers. First, the Tu-95MS Bear, a turboprop-powered strategic bomber introduced in 1956. It has an exceptional range of 15,000 kilometers, allowing it to carry long-range cruise missiles across intercontinental distances. Number 2, the Tu-22M Backfire, which was introduced in 1973. While technically classified as a supersonic medium-range bomber due to its more limited range of only 7,000 kilometers, it is frequently used in strategic roles. Finally, the youngest brother, the stud of the family, the Tu-160 Blackjack. This supersonic swing-wing heavy bomber was designed to deliver massive payloads of cruise missiles at high speed and from long distances. It is equipped to carry up to 12 KH-101 or KH-102 missiles, and possesses a combat range of approximately 12,000 kilometers without refueling. All these aircraft are named after Andrei Nikolaevich Tupolev, a pioneer in Soviet aviation. During World War II, Tupolev was part of those officers that were supposed to be purged. The moment the war started, he was released from jail, and that's when he designed the Tu-2, a fast and versatile twin-engine bomber that became the Soviet Union's second most important tactical bomber. Can you imagine? Over 2,000 Tupolev-2 bombers were built. In the early years of the Cold War, he was tasked with reverse engineering the American Boeing B-29 Superfortress strategic bomber. The result was the Tu-4, the Soviet Union's first long-range strategic bomber, which entered production in the late 1940s. Building on that foundation, Tupolev developed a new generation of strategic bombers. By April 1955, his team had completed the design of the Tu-95, which would go on to become a cornerstone of Soviet and later Russian long-range aviation for decades. After the Soviet Union spent all its money on a war that never happened,
A great success!
the question is, how many of these bombers are still active? And that's because Russia is not really building new strategic bombers. They're rather focused on upgrading and modernizing their current inventory. As of early 2025, Russia's strategic bomber fleet comprised 48 Tu-95 MS Bear, 16 supersonic Tu-160 Blackjack, as well as 57 Tu-22 M2 or 3 Backfire, for an estimated total of 120 strategic bombers. Other analysts suggest that the operational strength of Russia's bomber fleet is actually closer, or rather was closer, to about 80 aircraft, the remaining ones only being used for spare parts. So any loss of these strategic bombers is a big problem because they can't really be replaced. Now, in the context of the Ukraine war, these bombers are meant to target Ukraine's military, transportation, and energetic infrastructure. Apart from nuclear warheads, they primarily fire the Kh-101 cruise missile, which has a range of up to 5,000 kilometers and a payload of 400 to 450 kilograms. The arsenal also includes the Kh-555 and the Kh-32. Russia's strategic bomber fleet typically operates from one of these 8 air bases, many of which have already been targeted by Ukrainian drones. For example, on the 5th of December 2022, one of these strikes targeted Engels 2 and reportedly damaged 2 Tu-95 bombers. That's when our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia pulled some borscht from its sleeve. Now, since the beginning of the war, Ukraine kept getting pounded by Russian bombers dropping their thick loads on Ukrainian facilities. We all know about Ukraine's problems in regards to air defense capabilities. Remaining on the defensive was difficult because Ukraine was slowly exhausting all its remaining air defense units. So the SBU, Ukraine Secret Services, prepared an operation to turn the tables and tackle the problem at its roots, Russia's striking capabilities. Contrary to Ukrainian drone strikes from the past, this time the plan was bold. In typical SAS fashion, they thought, why not launch the drones directly from Russian soil? In these images released after the operation, we can see Vasil Maliuk, the head of the SBU and mastermind behind this plan. He can be seen looking at the satellite map of Russian airfields, with various models of enemy bombers clearly visible. At least this time, Ukraine didn't release a trailer before D-Day. Let's take a quick moment to talk about Maliuk. Here from The Guardian, one senior Ukrainian official that has worked closely with Maliuk described him as a bulldog. He isn't an intellectual, he doesn't reflect or hesitate. Another SBU official said, one of the good things of Operation Spiderweb is that it didn't leak. Maliuk got rid of a lot of traitors. Meanwhile, Yuri Butusov, a military journalist, said Maliuk had also enabled the operation by disregarding hierarchy and pushing forward young agents and risk-takers. Overall, Maliuk has given the freedom of action and resources to promote very decisive, very responsible leaders, some of them very young people. Starting in December 2023, so 18 months ago, Ukrainian agents planted inside Russia built an actual company as a cover-up for their operation. They rented a warehouse in Chelyabinsk Oblast from where they created genuine orders and prepared transporters. They were selling prefabricated houses and cabins. As you can see, the facility is located near the Kazakhstan border, which most likely served as a route to smuggle agents, the drones manufactured in Ukraine, as well as all the explosive components. Blyat, at this rate I will soon call you Governor Tokayev. As you can see in these images, those were simple quadcopters, but that were upgraded to carry relatively heavy payloads. That's why the SBU chose the OSA FPV drones from the company First Contact, one of the few models that has a noticeably thick and massive closed frame, just like we like them, where all the electronics are located and all the wires are routed. It was a good choice because the drones would have to sustain a trip of hundreds of kilometers inside a truck across Russia's rugged roads. In terms of specs, the OSA can lift up to 3.3 kilograms of payload and fly for up to 15 minutes for a combat range of 8 kilometers. If that wasn't clear enough, these drones would have to take off from within 8 kilometers of enemy air bases. So the SBU would have to find a way to deploy the drones as close as possible to enemy airfields without being detected. While the SBU was working on this operation, on May 28, 2025, a massive leak exposed Russia's entire nuclear bases, building plans, security layouts, IT systems, port equipment, and, according to some rumors, even browsing history. Honestly, I don't know which one is worse. We're talking about 2 million documents that revealed critical information and structural vulnerabilities. This is said to be the largest intelligence leak in the history of the Russian military. The Russians thought, for sure it can't get worse than this, right? Right? During that time, trucks carrying the prefabricated wooden cabins drove out of the warehouse and dispersed across Russia. Allegedly, it was a 37-year-old Ukrainian called Artem Timofeev that bought the trucks. He became a Russian citizen before the war and registered as a private entrepreneur in 2024. Meanwhile, the drivers were Russian, and they didn't know anything about the operation. Just another delivery. Overall, 6 trucks were dispatched for this mission, meaning the SBU's objective was to potentially strike up to 6 enemy airfields. The truck drivers were simply told to stop at a specific location at a specific time, and that's when the fireworks went off. The top part of the containers blew up, and a total of 117 drones began flying out. In the end, Operation Spiderweb targeted 4 airfields across Russia, but the bulk of the damage was reported in 2 of them, Belaya and Olenia air bases. The mission could not be fully completed because a problem happened with the truck meant to target the Ukrainian airbase in the Far East. The driver of the truck was probably just running late and his truck suddenly started exploding. Unfortunately for him, he went inside his vehicle to see what was going on when everything detonated. And low-key, this is also what saved the Ukrainian airbase. Now, there's another driver of one of these drone carriers that was allegedly found strangled with a plastic cord, and we don't know anything else about this story. Overall, in this graph by the Financial Times, we can see how Ukraine claimed to have struck 40 Russian bombers, but only 11 or 12 were confirmed by independent analysts using satellite images. So there was a lot of debate in regards to these numbers until the 4th of June. When Deep State UA posted a 4-minute 43-second video of the entire drone strikes. Now, once again, due to the editing, it's very difficult to get the actual full picture of what happened. What's for sure is that Olenia airbase got hit pretty badly. I counted 17 drones being used in that airbase, of which I could visually confirm 10 direct hits on target. This resulted in 5 Tu-95s being hit, 3 Tu-22s, and an Antonov AN-12 transport aircraft, for a total of 9 aircraft. To get a full picture of these drone strikes, we have to look at the satellite images posted by AviVector on Twitter. In the end, if we only take into account the fully destroyed aircraft from Olenia airbase, we can count 4 Tu-95s and 1 AN-12 that have been burned to the ground. One thing you probably noticed in the previous footage is how the Russians placed tires on their aircraft. Well, long story short, tires are intended to disrupt the visual and infrared signatures of the aircraft. The idea was that tires alter the aircraft's silhouette, potentially causing the missile or drone to fail to recognize it as a valid target. Did it work? But in that case, why weren't all the aircraft covered with these tires? And the thing is that you can see those tires using satellite images. The Ukrainians could have definitely trained their own attack models to take the tires into account. Oh yeah, disclaimer talking about images and all this. Watch out for fake AI generated images of the strikes like this one. This picture is simply not plausible because after the drone strikes, the entire aircraft would burn and just turn to ashes. On the Ivanovo airbase, Deep State showed 2 drones being used, which struck the antenna of 2 A-50 early warning and control aircraft. These 2 A-50s were probably badly damaged but not completely burned down. It was also reported that these 2 aircraft were not operational, as they did not have their engines installed. Further south, 4 drones reached the Diaghilevo airbase, but I could only see 2 that managed to detonate right into enemy aircraft. Regardless, the damage was 3 Tu-22s damaged or destroyed for Russia. And from what I've read, many of the aircraft in that airfield were not operational. At last, it's the Belaya base that got ravaged by at least 22 Ukrainian drones, of which I could visually confirm 7 direct hits on target. So by combining this footage with satellite images, the total damage for Russia in Belaya airbase was 3 Tu-95s, 4 Tu-22s, and 1 Ilyushin Il-78 aerial refueling tanker. So in summary, 7 Tu-95s and 4 Tu-22s, for a total of at least 11 Russian strategic bombers, and 1 An-12 transport aircraft, completely destroyed. Meanwhile, according to these Russian analysts, it's 12 to 13 strategic bombers that were destroyed or damaged to the point that it's better just scraping them. All this to say that we're very far from the 40 Russian aircraft that were destroyed as claimed by Ukrainian sources. They said that because that's the amount of drones that actually reached the Russian airfields. Now how about we take a look at the losses per model. 7 Tu-95s destroyed out of an estimated 48 units available, or 14.5% losses, and 4 Tu-22 burned down out of an estimated 57 units, or 7% losses. Of course, like we've seen, a good number of other aircraft have been damaged, of which we can think many will be damaged beyond repair. But of course, only the Russian Air Force has the total figures of their losses that day. Now, if we focus strictly on visually confirmed destroyed aircraft, Russia lost 11 bombers out of an operational fleet estimated at 80 units, or 13.75% losses. So yes, it's definitely a big slap for the Russian Air Force, a humiliation, and a remarkable operation by Ukraine's SBU. It's also important to remember that these strategic bombers are not the only platforms that can fire cruise missiles. For example, Russian warships can fire the equivalent caliber missiles, and there are also ground launchers like the Iskander-M systems. However, these platforms are more vulnerable and their range is limited compared to aerial assets. But they can still reach targets anywhere in Ukraine. Overall, Operation Spiderweb was a great success for Ukraine. With just over 100 drones, the Ukrainians caused Russia an estimated $7 billion in damage, and took out a considerable chunk of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. And in the process, the Ukrainians suffered 0 casualties. This raid inflicted more losses than any air defense systems could have ever achieved. Thus, Operation Spiderweb is a perfect example of how offense is the best defense. But let's dig a little bit deeper and go back to the drones. In total, 45 OSA FPV drones were shown in the Deep State UA video, for 21 visually confirmed hits on target. Remember, we were told 117 FPV drones were used in the operation. They flew out from 4 out of 6 trucks. This means an average of 30 drones per truck. So if we go to the drawing board, out of 117 units, 45 reached enemy air bases. That's a 38% success rate. And in regards to direct hits, 21 out of these 45, so roughly 50% or 18% of the total amount of drones. Now, I'll be honest, for a day or two I kept asking myself some questions. What about all the other drones? What happened to them? A total of 72 drones out of 117 are unaccounted for. And it seems some of these raids failed miserably. For example, in Ivanovo Air Base, we only see the strikes of 2 drones. What happened to the other 28 that flew out from the same truck? Same story in Diaghilevo, where it seems that only 4 out of 30 drones actually reached the base. How did the Ukrainians control these drones? They're so far away from Ukrainian bases. So one piece of evidence indicated that they were controlled using 4G LTE mobile internet, meaning they can't be jammed unless you turn off mobile internet in the entire sector. It's definitely possible, but it requires perfect coordination and early detection. One possibility was that Ukraine infiltrated saboteurs inside Russia to control the UAVs. But we're talking about at least 117 drones, so 117 drone operators. It's a lot, and you're telling me that none of them were arrested by the FSB. Then there was this info about how these attack drones were remotely piloted using artificial intelligence. Yes, AI-controlled kamikaze drones that acquired targets on their own. That is truly unprecedented. My friends, welcome to modern warfare. At the same time, if I'm looking back at the footage, the way the drones move is not something that could have been programmed. It feels as if humans controlled the drones right before the strikes. It's possible that the drones flew out of the trucks and guided themselves towards the air bases using AI. And then, at the last moment, drone operators manually controlled the drones to strike the critical parts of the bombers they found. So that's one possibility. However, where were the drone operators located? We were told they were close to an FSB base, but what does that even mean? Could just be information to freak out the Russians. I did some more digging, and you will notice that the screen of some of these FPV drones displayed GPS 3D fix. This indicates that the OSA drones had reliable positioning data, enabling accurate navigation to strike specific aircraft, for example, targeting vulnerable parts of bombers. In this case, we can assume it was a programmed strike, guided with artificial intelligence. However, other drones displayed the words failsafe, GPS no fix, EKF, and vibe. The vibe and EKF warning suggest that vibrations, or vibe, likely occurred from transport or launch conditions. In turn, this caused loosened components, which introduced sensor noise, potentially triggering failsafe mode, a safety mechanism activated when the drone loses connection with a controller or detects a critical issue. The fact that only 18% of the 117 drones that were launched had visually confirmed hits on target could indicate that a large number of units lost radio link or something happened in regards to unstable sensors, thus disrupting AI-guided or manual targeting, which reduced overall accuracy. So in summary, this means the Ukrainians programmed the exact itinerary of the drones, from the trucks towards the airfield. That's why they asked the truck drivers to stop at very specific locations. And once the drones reached the air bases using this pre-programmed itinerary, they needed some AI model to help them recognize the aircraft on the ground, which automatically guided the drones towards specific targets. This was facilitated by the fact that these airframes were stationary and probably didn't move in a couple days or even a couple weeks. And honestly, if we look closely, all the drones have more or less the same pattern of slowly landing on the aircraft before the image cuts. Another thing I noticed while working on the map is the location of the drone carrying trucks. All the drones were located within an 8-kilometer range from the air bases, except for the one near Ukrainka that detonated 9 kilometers away from the base. I also noticed the pattern that for some reason all the trucks were located southwest of the airfields they intended to target, and honestly, I don't know why. In the end, Operation Spiderweb was a great success for Ukraine and showcased the creativity of its secret services. Many also asked why the Russians did not build some sort of hangars to protect their aircraft. It's a very good question. For example, the Chinese Air Force has dozens of these hillside bunkers to protect its aerial assets. Not only that, but it also prevents enemy satellites from tracking the movement of these aircraft. Parts of the answer stems from the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty signed between the United States and Russia. In accordance with this treaty, both the US and Russia must allow mutual inspections to verify compliance, increasing transparency of their locations and operational status at air bases, meaning no hangars allowed. However, Russia is no longer participating in the New START treaty. For example, they started refusing inspections. But it seems that they still allow US satellites to verify the numbers of strategic bombers so that no treaty violations are occurring. Or maybe it's just some cope and the Russians are actually very stupid to have left all their airframes like that in the open. So what can Russia do to protect its bomber fleet against future Ukrainian strikes? I would say increase electronic warfare capabilities. So that's number one. Number two, just like at the front, building cages around these parked aircraft, maybe even nets all around the bases. And number three, lots and lots of decoys to fool enemy drones. And why not add some more of these pagan signs that act as anti-drone shields? We can also notice how Ukraine did not target the more modern and nuclear-capable Tu-160 bombers, rather focusing on older platforms that bombed Ukrainian infrastructure like the Tu-95 and Tu-22, probably just to avoid escalation. While Russia promised a response, on the 3rd of June, Ukraine struck the Crimean Bridge, using underwater drones or possibly a mine. They detonated 1,100 kilograms of explosives on one of the bridge's pylons. The bridge is still standing, but is damaged. At the same time of this strike, multiple NATO aircraft were also circling around the Black Sea. Overall, this is the third attack by the SBU against the very symbolic Kerch Bridge. On the night of the 5th of June, two Russian Tu-95 MS Bear bombers reportedly took off, one from Olenia Air Base and another from Engels 2. Apparently, Tu-160s also took part in this operation, most likely due to the significant amount of losses for the other types of bombers. Followed a monstrous number of missiles and drones flying towards western Ukraine. Here you can see a Russian Kh-101 cruise missile deploying multiple heat-seeking decoys before striking a target in Lutsk, and then the resulting explosion somewhere in the city. Another video showed a Russian 3M54 caliber cruise missile flying towards Lutsk as well. The fact that caliber missiles were used means the Russian Navy was also involved in these strikes. Meanwhile, explosions were also reported in Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv. Overall, I feel that the Russian response was relatively weak compared to the damage caused by Operation Spiderweb. According to AKM Mapping on Twitter, Russian ground forces launched 10 Iskander-M ballistic missiles, the Navy fired 13 caliber cruise missiles, and the Air Force 4 Kh-101s and 1 anti-radiation Kh-31P. Could be more, could be less, but this goes to show that Russia has many more vectors available than the Air Force to strike deep inside Ukraine. Oh yeah, and on June 5th as well, Ukraine struck Bryansk Oblast, reportedly destroying one Iskander missile launcher and seriously damaging two others. And that same night, while Russian missiles were flying, Ukraine targeted the Bryansk airport. After the strike, they claimed to have destroyed a Russian Mi-8 transport helicopter and damaged a Mi-35 attack helicopter. And it's not done because on the 6th of June, Ukrainian drones struck the Kronstadt factory in Dubna, north of Moscow. Apparently, they inflicted significant damage to the plant producing Orion UCAVs and Banderol cruise missiles. It's yet to be determined if these high-tech guerrilla war tactics will have an impact on the battlefield in eastern Ukraine. But imagine the Ukrainians managed to strike Russian tank factories, the factories producing BMPs, factories producing ammunition and artillery shells. In that case, such strikes could definitely play an important role in this war. And according to the latest news, on the 9th of June, Ukrainian UAV struck the Veneer factory known to be making key components for S-300 air defense systems, T-90M and Armata tanks, BMPs, Terminator Orlan-10, Orion UAVs, Su-34 aircraft, naval vessels, submarines, and many more. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.